Hello Forest Questers, and welcome to our latest edition of Virtual Forest School with Forest Quest. Today Wolf and I are going to give you 2 ideas that you can do with an empty bottle. I'm going to show you how to make a wormery, and later on Wolf is going to show you how to make a simple water filter. So for the wormery you need to cut off the top of your bottle, give it a really good clean so that it's just right for the worms to go into. And in the bottom, you need to put a selection of small stones that will provide the drainage necessary to create the perfect environment. I'll put a few of those in the bottom. They're just stones that I've picked up on my daily walk. And then what we're going to do is layer to about halfway, 3/4 of the way up, with soil that I've just dug up out of my vegetable patch and sand. It'll create kind of stripy effect. So we'll put some soil in, and then before the sand I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of water. If you haven't got a water spray, don't worry, use a spoon and just put a couple of spoonfuls of water in to make sure that the soil is nice and moist. And then we'll do a layer of sand. Don't worry if you haven't got any sand, just fill the whole bottle up with your soil. So keep going till you've got to about 2/3 of the way up the bottle. And you can see I've got a kind of stripy effect there, and hopefully it'll be nice and moist in there because the worms don't like it too dry, they don't like it too wet, but they do need a little bit of moisture. Now, the next thing we need to do is find our worms. If you remember last week, Wolf showed you a few places that you would be successful in finding worms: under rocks, under wood, or you can dig into your flower beds until you find some. So once you've located your worms and you very carefully put them into the top of your wormery, they do need some food. So I've been out collecting and I've got a selection of things that I think my worms might like, and I'm just going to put them in the top. I've got leaves, few daisies and dandelions, a few petals, and also I've got some vegetable peelings left over from my tea last night, so just ask Mum to put them to one side for you. And again, a little bit more moisture. And what we need to do now is just put a cover over the top to make sure that our worms don't try and escape. And I'm just using cling film, which I'll wrap around the top of the bottle, tear off, and just to hold it in place, I'm going to put an elastic band round it. Now, I know our forest questers now will be worrying about the worms because there's no air holes. So the next job to do very carefully, and if you're not happy, get a grown-up to do this for you, is punch in holes in the top to make sure that there's lots of oxygen getting in. There we go, that should be enough. So our wormery is almost done. The last thing we need to replicate for the worms is the dark. They're living underground, so we need to make this as dark as we can too. And to do that, what I'm going to do is wrap a piece of black paper around it. If you don't have black paper, you could use wrapping paper, you could use newspaper. Wrap it round and secure it with some tape at the back. And then we're going to put this in a cool place. Might be a corner of your garden, it might be in your garage where it's nice and dark, or behind a bush perhaps. After a few days, check on your wormery. Take the black paper off, take the cling film off, check that it still feels moist, and if not, add a little bit more water. Add some more food if you think the worms need it. Cover it up and then leave it again. Now, after a couple of weeks, if you're really lucky and your worms have been very productive, when you unwrap the black paper, and I haven't got one to show you, which is a shame, but never mind, you should see little tunnels appearing between the soil and the sand, and that's where the worms have been burrowing down. If you're really lucky, you might even see some of the food that they've been eating being dragged down into the bottom of your wormery. After you've had a little look, check conditions again to make sure that the worms are happy, cover it up and leave it for a little bit longer. Now we'd love to see your wormeries and to see if you've been successful. So if you have a go, please do send us a photograph or a little note just to tell us how it's been for you. Have fun. See you next week.
Okay, so following on the theme of what to do with a bottle, we're going to have a go at making a water filter using a plastic bottle. Some of us have done this before, but I just thought it would be worth having another go. And for those that haven't done it, it's quite good fun. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut the bottom off. Now, of course, you might not have a pair of scissors, but if you're in a survival situation, you'd obviously use your knife, which of course you're going to have with you. So cut round, all the way round, cut the bottom off. Yes, I've just practiced, just showing you. Ta-da. We don't need that bit for now. We're going to use this piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this with material that's going to filter the water. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that it doesn't fall out the bottom. What I'm using here is a piece of cloth, and I'm going to put it over the top and hold it in place with an elastic band. Again, in a survival situation, you would find other means of doing this. You might have to cut the corner of your shirt off. You might need a bit of string or a lace to tie it on with, but whatever you need to do to create that. And then we're going to put material in here, finest stuff at the bottom, densest or thickest stuff at the top. So the first thing we're going to use is charcoal. Again, you may not have charcoal, doesn't matter. You'd find something else that's equally fine to use. So what I'm going to do, because I've got access to these things, is I'm going to use a mortar and pestle just to break up this charcoal into nice fine bits, as best I can. We'll try and get it as small as possible. And charcoal is good not just to filter out particles in the water, but it does also take some of the chemicals out which you could have in water that you've collected from somewhere. Good, nice little pile of charcoal there, see that? So that goes into the bottom of our bottle, filling up the little hole at the bottom, filling up the drinking bit and a little bit in the bottom there, so that's great. So then what we're going to use is what I've got here, really nice fine sand. So even some of it's coming through the charcoal, but that's all right. Then I've got some grit or some slightly thicker sand, put that on top. Like so. And then in the final bucket, I've got stones, fairly small stones, but they're going to go on top like that. Brilliant. So here we go. We've got 4 levels of the material that's going to help filter the water. The final level that we're going to put in is vegetation. One of the best things just happens to be grown in my garden, cleavers or sticky weeds. So you can wrap up sticky weeds like this into a bit of a ball and put that in the top. There are other things you could use, some mosses, but it's really important it's not going to be something that's poisonous. And we know that cleavers are really good. Stinging nettles are okay, but they don't catch the particles in the water quite as well as sticky weed. So there we go, nice little filter. Last thing we've got to do is we've got to hang it up somehow. So what we're going to do, I'm going to use a hole punch. Again, in a survival situation, you're not going to have a hole punch, but you'd use your knife just to make a hole. The good thing about a hole punch is it makes a nice round hole, which isn't going to break so easily when it's used lots. And then we're going to use a piece of string. Feed it through the 2 holes, one in that one side, out the other. And there we got a hanging filter. What we're going to do now is hang it up somewhere. So I'm going to tie it up to this tree, put the 2 ends round a branch like that, just tie the 2 ends together in a reef knot, left over right, right over left, and then we've got our filter hanging there. Now we're going to put water through it. The first quite a bit of water is not going to be very clean, primarily because the charcoal itself is going to be quite dirty, and we can see the first bits of water dribbling through now. Now if I catch that in a little pot, we're going to let all of that drain through. It's got a slight greyish tinge from the charcoal. So I probably wouldn't want to drink that even if I boiled it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and filter some water. So here is this manky water. You wouldn't want to drink that like that. Importantly, all these bits in here, we need to get rid of those because that's what holds the bacteria. We need to get rid of all of those and then boil the clean water that's left to get rid of anything else that's not visible. So we're going to pour this in and then we're going to put something underneath to catch it in. And the something is something that we can use to boil the water. It's going to take a little while for all that water to go through. Pretty clean water, I have to say. So there we go. We've had a look at how we can use bottles in a forest school scenario, both to make a wormery and for a water filter in a survival situation. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you again next week.